Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Friday Reads. I'm having a bit of a parental crisis here, aren't I? Huh? I'm having a bit of a parental crisis. Because it's 91 degrees outside here in Boston, Fahrenheit. It's 91 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity is creeping upwards steadily, so it's gross outside. Even the pavement is hot to the touch. And I have a little bean who overheats. She is extremely prone to overheating. Shut up, you. I'm talking about you, baby. So when we're inside for any length of time, she starts complaining that she wants to go out. I want to go out. I want to go out. I want to go out. And then when we go out, we get no further than maybe 10 feet from the end of the driveway, and she says, "Oh, it's hot. I want to go back in. Carry me." And I'm stuck either way. Either way, I'm the bad guy. But anyway, we have a Friday Reads to do. Here, let's see if we can control the lighting there. There we go. Which is a time-honored BookTube tradition where BookTubers take stock of their reading, pause from all of the talking and the reading and the filming and whatnot, and take stock of where they are. I've had a very good reading week. I've spent it, aside from trips to the Brattle Bookshop, I've spent it mostly just reading on the couch. And that's been great, and I want to show you a thumbnail of that reading. Now, I'm going to start with, I'll grab the MiniMe here. I'm going to start with 3 books that I haven't read yet. I'll be reading them this weekend. So let me see if I can call them up here on the MiniMe. Yes, okay, the first one is The Only Good Indians. This is by Stephen Graham Jones, and it is a modern, I think, quasi-horror novel for friends who are tracked by something that wants them dead, but worse than dead, that sort of thing. Those of you who watch this channel for a long time will know that I'm not a huge fan of horror. It just doesn't work on me. But this author is incredible. I've read a huge amount of what he's written. I cannot praise him highly enough. He is fantastic. Anything he writes, I will read. And this is his latest thing. Then the next one is a little bit of a puzzle for me, and we'll see what I make of it. This publisher has been doing a series of YA novels adapting the characters from a DC Comics super team, the Teen Titans. Some of them and some others. I'm not really sure why. I'm not really sure what the point of this is. But this is by Cami Garcia with art by Gabriel Piccolo, and this one is about Beast Boy, who is a very old DC character, a boy named Garfield Logan, who has green hair and who was originally a member of the Doom Patrol and then became a member of the Teen Titans, and has the ability to transform into any kind of animal. They also are green. He retains his human intellect but he can transform into any kind of animal. And he's kind of an odd choice for this line of YA novels that is being put out in conjunction with DC Comics, because in modern YA, at least in the large circles of modern YA, you as a writer are contractually obligated. You cannot, under pain of legal penalty, write a character in which the hero is white, male, and straight. And Garfield Logan, Beast Boy, is all 3 of those things. So unless he changes in this book, unless Cami Garcia, who, as far as I can tell, has never read a comic book before, much less written one, unless she just decides, well, yeah, but my Beast Boy is gay, then unless she decides that, I don't understand how she got around the lawyers, the YA lawyers, to write a book about this character. But one way or another, I'm always interested to see. The illustrations will win the day for me, but I'm interested to see what the writing is too. I think I read one other book in this series about the Teen Titan Raven that just completely reimagines her. I ended up wondering, okay, well, if you want to do that, if you want to tell this completely reimagined story of this character, why use Raven at all? If it's not, I mean, if you're adapting a comic book character, aren't you using that material? Isn't that the whole point? That comic book fans will want to read it? And I have a feeling from the description of this book that I'm going to feel the same way. This is Garfield Logan in high school wanting to fit in with the cool kids and willing to do anything to get their attention. Okay, that's a YA novel. If in the course of that YA novel and the dramatic upheavals that cause him to alienate his true friends and then rediscover what true friendship is, in the course of all that, he discovers that he has metamorphic abilities and can transform into any kind of green animal that he wants, that's a different book. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how this will go. I am assuming that by the end of this novel, Garfield Logan will either be bi or gay. And that goes in the face of 50 years of comic book continuity, where Garfield Logan has always been not only heterosexual, but extremely vocally horny. So we shall see. I am always interested in this sort of thing, so we'll see what the writing and artist team does with it. And then, speaking of the gays, there's a piece of gay fiction that isn't, I don't believe it's out yet. I'm going to be reading it this weekend. It's by an author named Andrew Gray. And Andrew Gray has a large and devout following of readers, as indie authors tend to do. Really good indie authors tend to develop a very solid fan base. It's part and parcel of indie publishing, the part that I really like. I have never read anything else by this author. This will be my first time. But it looks to me like the advance reviews on various websites give it a thumbs up, say that this is not in other words, not a bad place to start with this author. This is Catch of a Lifetime by Andrew Gray. The MiniMe is not really behaving itself, but trust me, if the windows are open, the glare would be even worse. That is, roughly speaking, the cover. It wouldn't work anyway because it's a very bright cover. But am I right? Is it going to disappear if we have more light? Oh no, it's actually better. Okay, who knew? Who can understand optics? This is a contemporary gay novel about a gorgeous young man. Of course, they're all gorgeous young men. A gorgeous young man who comes back to Florida unexpectedly. He planned to be gone and never come back. And during the initial setup of the book, he finds himself on a fishing cruise with a bunch of people and also another amazingly hot young gay guy. And the amazingly hot young gay guy is likewise dissatisfied with the current state of his life, and the two of them, I imagine, hit it off and fall happily ever after in love. We shall see. I confess that I find a lot of contemporary gay fiction to be kind of disappointing, to put it mildly. Very poorly written, and also just trite, just protracted gay sentiment Hallmark cards of a type that I try it anyway, just in case there's going to be something that's going to be interesting. Every once in a while I do find something that's interesting, but let's just put it, in the case of 2 of those 3 on the MiniMe, I am prepared to be disappointed. Stephen Graham Jones does not disappoint. There's no chance that he will. It's just in the DNA of how he writes, so I don't have to worry about that. Is that schmutz on the MiniMe? Oh my God, it is. Oh, let's get rid of that. But the other 2, the Beast Boy thing and Catch of a Lifetime, I don't know. I don't know what to make. Usually, identity politics pandering YA drives me nuts. Usually it does that because it has nothing else going for it. And the clear implication in identity politics YA is sometimes stated outright by the characters in the books themselves. But the overriding atmosphere of such books, even if it isn't stated outright, is if you don't like this, then you're a bigot. Just that huge jump from one world to another, that a huge jump over 10 or 11 assumptions. But usually that's there, either on the surface or directly underneath the surface, is the warning that if you don't like this, it's because you don't like blue-haired lesbians or teenagers coming out as asexual beings or whatever it is, whatever the central identity politics thing is going on in the book. It's not, you can't possibly dislike this because it's poorly done. That is off the table. Usually the assumption, either on the surface or directly under the surface in this kind of YA books, is if you don't like this for any reason, then you're a bigot. That's why you don't like it, and either you know that or you don't know it, but we know it. We, the right thinkers on the right side of history, know where you're coming from. So the Andrew Gray and the Beast Boy thing could disappoint. The Stephen Graham Jones thing probably will not. And that's a sort of a thumbnail sketch of some of the things that I'll be reading this weekend. There's a lot of other stuff. But I also wanted to show you, rather than just run down the list, I plan on reading, I'm kind of hoping for 10 or 11 books. this weekend. The majority of those will be new things, but those are the ones that I wanted to show you. But I also want to show you some stuff that isn't new, some stuff that I have also just recently read. Quite a few of which are brand new. I got them at the Brattle Bookshop, but one of them, the first of them, I got from a long-suffering publicist. That is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. That is part of, this is the beginning of Stormalong, a booktube read-along of the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. These 3 immense books. At a relatively handleable pace, a relatively slow pace, geared to finish up right when The Rhythm of War, the 4th book in the series, comes out in November. We have to hope that it comes out in November. We have to hope that America is not convulsed in a second wave of this pandemic that will make things even worse than the first wave. We have to hope that's true. There's also something else that could happen in November that would derail not only publishing schedules but everything else in the entire country. We have to hope for smooth sailing in November just in general. But in the meantime, the booktubers for Stormalong have been doing introductory videos, and just recently, just yesterday, they did a live stream that I missed. I missed it. I don't know why. I was probably just hip deep in writing, and so I missed a chance to go on the live stream and make trouble. But nevertheless, I watched a chunk of it today, and it looked like it was a lot of fun. And I am restricting myself to the read-along's pace. So I am just doing the beginning of The Way of Kings for this part of June. And this is my 3rd time through it. And I got to confess, I am loving the discussions that are going on in Stormalong. I will leave a link to all of their videos down below, because if this series attracts you but also intimidates you, boy oh boy, you'll never find a better entrance point and a better group of people to take you through it than the folks at Stormalong. So I have been enjoying this quite a bit, and I have been surprising myself. I have a trade paperback of this. I also have it on the iPad. It's been surprising to me how convenient I've found it to read this mass market paperback. I don't know why. This is exactly the sort of thing where I would ordinarily say it no longer appeals to me, but I've been reading it in this format, and I've been enjoying the heck out of it. So that's wonderful. Then there was this book from yesterday. This is The Running Sky by Tim D. This is a book about bird watching, and look at that cover. I read this and loved it. Absolutely loved it. The author can occasionally be over the top in his writing style, but sometimes an author in a birding book, especially being carried away like that, can be a lot of fun. I want to read you an excerpt here so that you can see what I mean. Dusk on the winter solstice, the shortest day and the longest night of the year. I was cold and alone on a track in the Somerset Levels. Those of you who have not been to the Somerset Levels, it's an amazing place, especially at dawn and dusk. Looking towards the dying light in the west, moving across the sky in front of me like the breath of the earth. Isn't that wonderful? Like the breath of the earth. Were thousands of birds, starlings arriving to roost, to put away their day, and so too on this day the year. From the next dawn, the glorious creep toward spring would be underway. More light, the future, repairs, songs, nests, eggs. The year had drained to this pinching day and its paltry hours of watery sun. In the middle of the afternoon, a cold, iron-hard dark arrived from the east and pushed all the light away to a buckling golden foil fussing on the western horizon. There the day launched a last flare like a crack of magma seamed through lava. The year was burning down. That's just awesome. The book is full of writing like that. A flock of starlings low on the ground as a breath of the earth. Amazing. And I loved it. I love the book. It goes on the nature shelf, or it would if I reorganized my shelves so that I had a nature shelf. I could have a nature bookcase. I should have a nature bookcase with nothing else. All of my categories here should be organized. And yet, despite the fact that YouTube and BookTube are full of stories of people taking the opportunity presented to them by the pandemic quarantines to do just that kind of reorganizing, I have not. I have not done that. I should. I really should do that. Then this next book was also a Brattle trip. I don't think it was yesterday, but I had my doubts about it. This is edited by George Plimpton, and it is excerpts from his interminable, snooty Paris Review interviews with authors over the years. The Writer's Chapbook. And this one is not just collections of those interviews. This is Plimpton breaking up those interviews and sifting through them for his collection of pet writers, talking about all sorts of aspects of the writer's life. So inspiration, work routines, how you deal with editors, how you deal with critics, all broken up by chapters like that. And I had my doubts because the Paris Review, those interviews are just so insufferable. They're just so insufferable. They're one of the only places in the world where you can regularly expect that the subject of the interview will refer to themselves as one. Well, one never knows, does one? Plimpton encouraged that kind of pseudo-intellectual condescension, and almost all of the people that he interviewed just fell for it and immediately started talking like that. But even so, I just ate this up. Just ate it up. Mainly because I think all of the authors that I find insufferable weren't around long enough. Every chapter is like 30 authors, so no one's around long enough to bother me. and like, for instance, I want to give you an example. There's a chapter called On Work Habits, and I'm going to read you 3 excerpts from 3 different writers, and I want you to guess at the end which one is the dude bro. I wonder if you'll have any trouble. Here's excerpt number 1. I can't understand writers who feel that they shouldn't have anything to do out of ordinary things of life, because I think that that is necessary. One has got to keep in touch with that. The solitude of writing is also quite frightening. It's quite close sometimes to madness. One just disappears for a day and loses touch. The ordinary action of taking a dress down to the dry cleaners or spraying some plants infected with green fly is a very sane and good thing to do. It brings one back, so to speak. But it also brings the world back. I have formed the habit over the last 2 books I've written of spending half an hour or so reading over what I'd written during the day just before I go to bed at night. Then, of course, you get tempted to fix it up, fuss with it at night. But I find that's good. But if I've been with friends or gone out somewhere, then I don't do that. The fact is that I lead a rather solitary life when I'm writing. That's excerpt number 1. Here's excerpt number 2. The best job that was ever offered to me was to become a landlord in a brothel. In my opinion, it's the perfect milieu for the artist to work in. It gives him perfect economic freedom. He's free of fear and hunger. He has a roof over his head and nothing whatever to do except keep a few simple accounts and go once every month to pay off the local police. And then we have excerpt number 3. Another thing I need to do when I'm near the end of the book is sleep in the same room with it. That's one reason I go home to Sacramento to finish things. Somehow the book doesn't leave you when you're asleep right next to it. In Sacramento, nobody cares if I appear or not. I can just get up and start typing. Now, those of you who are keen observers of Dude Bro Lit, and especially those Dude Bro aficionados out there, you started squealing. The Dude Bro aficionados out there started squealing hypersonically. All the bats in the neighborhood were alerted with the second excerpt. The best job that ever offered me was to become a landlord in a brothel. Yeah, not a landlord in a shelter or a boys' home or an ordinary tenement, but a brothel. Yeah, that really happened, I'm sure. And of course, that's William Faulkner. Yeah, because with Dude Bro Lit, it's all about the appurtenances, right? It's all about the extras. Do you have the extras down? Or do you yearn to have them down? Well, that's the important thing. The cigar, the brandy, the crippling alcohol habit, the weird posture. Do you write cantilevered over an air conditioner or on top of a refrigerator or with boxing gloves on or whatever? And, you know, if you have a job while you write, a job that allows you freedom to concentrate on your work, well, maybe a landlord would be good. No, it can't just be a landlord. I was a landlord at a brothel. And all the Dude Bro boys out there are just squealing, oh my God, I want that so bad. Can I write my books while being a landlord at a brothel and going out once every few hours to pay off the police or run with the bulls in Pamplona? What about craft? What about bearing down on your work? What about revising? No, I don't really want to do any of that. I really want to be a landlord in a brothel. The other 2 were Joan Didion and Nadine Gordimer talking sense. Joan Didion being a little bit mystical sense of going to sleep in the same room with her manuscript. And Nadine Gordimer's point is exactly right. That if you devote yourself monk-like to writing and don't do anything in the real world, your writing will suffer and so will you. That is entirely right. So maybe... my point is, I encountered that landlord in a brothel type Dude Bro crapola far more seldomly in this book than I thought I would. So, and most of it was downright interesting. downright, I forgot. I occasionally do forget. I block it out of my mind. I forgot the breadth of the ambit of writers that Plimpton talked to, and that his various Paris Review dog's bodies talked to. It was for a long time, maybe it still is, considered a sort of an industry badge to have a long and rambling one thinks this about one's art review in the Paris interview in the Paris Review. So maybe they still do it. But boy, breaking it up like this and making it into a themed chapbook, perfect way to do it for me. Perfect way. Believe it or not, even though it's got Plimpton's face staring out of the spine, and even though it's full of writers I hate, this is probably going to come in this room. It was that enjoyable. And then the last thing was also a reread. It was a reread, but it was also a recent buy. I bought it at the Brattle just yesterday, and I told myself, well, you'll dip into it, but I spent hours last night reading it, just rereading it, because it's really, really good. It really is. It is a masterwork of memoir, and it's Palimpsest by Gore Vidal. I don't know. I am the first person to razz this author. I'm the first person to poke at his egotisms and his eccentricities, and especially later in life, his ill-advised detours into, prefrontal mania and whatnot. I'm the first person to do that. I always forget when I do that sort of thing what a powerhouse he is on the page. I just always forget that, how amazing he is. And this is a very different register from Gore Vidal's, for instance, his successful fiction. His successful fiction is very mannered. It's very consciously Jamesian. And this is much raw. It's much more raw than that. Much more photographic, you are there type thing. A memoir of his younger days. And again, I want to read you a bit of this because it's amazing. And I want to stress here one aspect of this that you will notice on your own, which is true of all great memoirs. It was true of, for instance, Anthony Burgess's 2 volumes of memoir. It's true for Robert Graves. It's all great memoirs have this quality, which you're going to notice when we're reading here, which is that you just want it to keep going. That's how I fell into reading this whole thing, when I meant only to dip in. Good memoirs are like that. You just want it to keep going, just flowing on and on and on. Where are we going to do here? 2 years later, I met Norman Mailer at the novelist Vance Bourgelat's house. Vance Bourgelat is the author of Now Playing at Canterbury, a great American novel that no one's ever heard of and that has not been in print in forever. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic, no matter what you hear. Also, he wrote a couple of other novels that are ripe for reprinting. He's much better than he comes off in memoirs like this. But anyway, Vance and his wife had organized a sort of New York literary salon, which tended to net writers rather than teacher writers. Fags were shunned, if not well closeted, while the Jewish writers tended to center around partisan review. Except for Tennessee, that's Tennessee Williams, and Bowles, that's John Bowles, and Louis Auchincloss, I never really got to know many of my contemporaries. Kind of strange that Gore Vidal would include Auchincloss in that list, as if he got to know Auchincloss at these gatherings instead of through his own family. But one way or another, you're wondering that. You're wanting to footnote, I wrote so much in the margins of this book this time around. But except for Tennessee and Bowles and Auchincloss, I never really got to know many of my contemporaries. I had the impression, no doubt an unjust one, that most of them were only playing at being writers, each modeling himself on one of the 3 prototypes of the previous generation: Faulkner, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. Mailer tells me that I was curious about his age and that of his parents. He says that I then calculated that I would win, as I was bound actuarially to outlive him. Notice he's saying that Mailer tells him this. He's not saying that he remembers making those calculations or making such comments to Norman Mailer. I do think that this ancient saw has a limited truth. Between outliving one's contemporaries and the ignorance of journalists, there's something not very much to be said for living a long time. Oh boy, talk about an ill-fitting prophecy. Gore Vidal, if he could come back to the world right now and look at his whole life right up to the end of it, I think he would be the first among many, including myself, to say that he lived too long. Old age is unsparing, and it didn't spare him. But notice the neat dance that's going on in that little paragraph. He tells us what Mailer says he said at those Bourgelat literary salons. He tells us what Mailer says he says, and then he argues with the point. Well, almost as though he's arguing with Mailer, when it's himself that he's arguing with. Did he say it or didn't he? he makes a point at several points in this memoir of poo-pooing the idea that he has forgotten things. When he wrote this memoir, he was at a point in his life where he was starting to get very touchy about people telling him that he was forgetting things. So you can either have one or the other there. It's either one thing or the other. Either you can look back on those long vanished literary salons, and God knows what's happened to the Beaujolais apartment in New York. I wonder what has. I wonder if anybody's living there, or if it's been partitioned up. But one way or another, you can either say that you can look back on those evenings and remember everything, or you can say, well, Malin says I said this, and imply that you didn't, but that you don't know one way or another. But anyway, years later, Norman told me, quote, "I thought you were the devil." I found him interesting, if long-winded. I never finished The Naked and the Dead, an absolute lie. Often, in this memoir, Gore Vidal will simply lie. And it's all for effect. I don't hold any of it against him. It's for effect to create a literary work. This isn't just a dictaphone. This is a literary work. But don't you believe it? He, of course, read The Naked and the Dead. The only reason he's saying he didn't finish it is because at the time it was more influential and popular and a better seller than anything he wrote. That's the only reason that he poo-poos it. But anyway, I never finished The Naked and the Dead, but I liked the next novel, Barbary Shore, which was savaged by the critics, including Gore Vidal. It's just a professional contrarian, that's all. He, there's Mailer, was trained at Harvard as an engineer, and I have a theory that the mind of an engineer, though well-suited for many things, is ill-suited for either literature or politics. For the engineer, everything must connect, while the natural writer or politician knows instinctively that nothing ever really connects, except in what we imagine science to be. Literature, like the politics of a Franklin Roosevelt, requires a divergent mind. Engineering, Mailer and Solzhenitsyn, requires a convergent mind. Compare Roosevelt's inspired, patternless arabesques as a politician, artfully dodging this way and that, to the painstaking engineer Jimmy Carter, doggedly trying to make it all add up and failing. As of 1950, if I had been thinking seriously of politics instead of mechanics of election, I would have been as one with Mailer. But I had missed all the wars of ideology for that 20 years, had convulsed New York intellectuals. Debates at school and around the family dinner table concerned real, not theoretical politics. Do we go to war or not? That was a poignant question around, indeed, for someone my age, and a matter of profound philosophic implications to a populist like Gore. He's not referring to himself there, but anyway. In any case, I was now interested only in reading and writing an anonymous sex. Although I have had several lifelong friends who were writers, I have never much enjoyed the company of writers. I also did not realize, nor did the others at Vance Bourgeois' gatherings, that we had arrived on the scene to witness the end of the novel. Today, the word novelist still enjoys a considerable prestige, so much so that both Mailer and Capote choose to call works of journalism novels. But that was 30 years ago. Today, an ambitious writer would be well advised to label any work of his imagination non-fiction, or perhaps a memoir. And that digs in two directions, right? Because you're reading that line about a novelist labeling his latest work a memoir in a memoir. That's one thing. That's one jab when you read that. The other jab is another bit. This book is shimmering with prescience. All kinds of prescience, good and bad, wanted and unwanted, known and unknown, to this author who could often see the future. And one of those things is, I don't know that if Gore Vidal paid attention to literature in his last 20 years. One of the refrains in that little bit there, "This was 30 years ago," is something that Gore Vidal was saying from when he was 30. That was a refrain of his for his entire life, where he would punctuate some point that he was making by saying, "This was all 30 years ago." But another one of those pieces of prescience is that last line. Look what we're living in now. Look what contemporary fiction is like now all around us, with one novelist after another simply transmuting memoir. Autofiction is exactly what that is. It's that kind of a dodge. It's that attempt to meld two different things in order to retain the status that comes with novelist, while making no chances, while gazing firmly at your own navel and writing a memoir. And little sunbursts, little firework bursts like that were all over the place when I was rereading this thing. I had such a blast. I can't believe that I ever got rid of this. This is now my third time reading it, and I firmly believe it's one of the best things Gore Vidal ever wrote. right up to the incredibly bittersweet final line. It's a finished work, but in a very different vocal register than anything else that he wrote. And I love it for that. I love it all the more for that. I was tempted when I finished this reread, pencil in hand, just furiously annotating. I won't be getting rid of this volume. I absolutely will not. If one of you says, boy, that sounds interesting, can I have it? My answer will be no. My answer will be no. I will find you a copy of this if you want it. Now that the Brattle bookshop is back open, now that thrift shops in Boston are back open, I can go back out into the wild and look for copies for you. I realize that a lot of you are not, for instance, in a financial position to be buying tons of books. I realize that a lot of you are not in a geographical position. You just don't have anything like a really good, active, used book scene anywhere near where you live. I realize that, and I am responsible. I will happily take up the slack. I will happily buy books for you, go and get them for you. Look around for them here in Boston and Cambridge, which are suffused with used bookstores. And now that I'm able to go out in them again, I'm happy to do that. But I'm not giving you this one. I'm not giving you this one. I'm going to keep this one. And when I finished it, oh God, it was the wee small hours of the morning. Frida was on her back and snoring, which she only does late at night. And when I finished it, I had a very rare impulse. You hear it a lot on BookTube, but almost never from me. I had a very rare impulse to just start it again. I didn't, but I very much wanted to. And it put me in mind to read Big Wilson and Little God by Anthony Burgess. It put me in mind to read Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves, and a bunch of other such books. It put me in mind to just make a stack of them and start reading them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to read a lot of new books, hopefully a lot more than the 3 that I showed you. But boy, oh boy, I'm glad I grabbed this at the Brattle. So there you go. That was a slightly lengthy Friday Reads for you. As usual with Friday Reads, I want to know what you're reading and what's on your immediate docket, what you're going to be reading. I've had a very good reading week, and I'm sort of planning on a very good reading weekend. We shall see. It's a pure matter of parenting, of caretaking. Not just because my little dog wants to go outside, even though when we get out, she immediately starts overheating. That's just parenting, and all you parents out there will know. Sometimes to your kid, you're just the villain. And there's no way around it. Sometimes you're just the villain. You're looking out for them, but they're too young for you to know that. You can't tell them that. So you just have to lump it. You just have to be the villain. You have to be the bad guy. But it's not just that. It's also that as it gets warmer and more humid here in Hyde Cottage, I'm going to be perfectly comfortable, but I'm going to be sort of split-brained, worried about whether or not Frida is too uncomfortable. Maybe it's time to put the AC unit in a window or something like that. But I don't count those on being big distractions. I plan on getting a lot done. One of the worst temptations that I'm feeling now is Master of Ballantrae by Robert Louis Stevenson. I shouldn't, absolutely shouldn't reread it. I shouldn't do that at all. But I'm kind of tempted. I'm not going to do it, though, because Stevenson is like Kipling or Arthur Conan Doyle or Trollope for me. There has to be a reason for me to reread it. Otherwise, I've reread it so many times, and I've got a lot of new stuff to read. So that my Friday is going to be the usual episode, the usual Manichaean battle between rereading. Because I'm just like the rest of you. Once I get on a rereading binge, I want to just keep doing it, and I can't. There are lots of new books for me to account for, self-published and otherwise. But anyway, I want to hear what you're doing for Friday Read, so I'm going to wrap this up and stop talking. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.